Heading into tonight's Democratic debate, there are growing divisions in the field. As the New York Times put it, mom and dad are fighting. And by that they mean Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, with Warren now confirming a report that Sanders told her in a private meeting that a woman could not win the presidency. She said in a statement, "Bernie and I met for more than 2 hours in December of 2018. Among the topics that came up was what would happen if Democrats nominated a female candidate. I thought a woman could win. He disagreed." But before that, Sanders sent his own statement to CNN, which first reported the conversation, saying it's sad that 3 weeks before the Iowa caucus and a year after that private conversation, staff who weren't in the room are lying about what happened. Do I believe a woman can win in 2020? Of course. After all, Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump by 3 million votes in 2016. And there's more. Politico reporter over the weekend accused the Sanders campaign of giving scripted talking points to volunteers, instructing them to criticize Warren and suggest their supporters are elitist. Sanders brushed off the allegations, but Warren, she wasn't buying it.
I hope Bernie reconsiders and turns his campaign in a different direction.
We'll have differences on issues. That's what campaign is about. But no one is going to be attacking Elizabeth.
We'll see if that's the case tonight's debate. The final primary showdown before the Iowa caucus is now just 20 days away. But any potential fireworks tonight may end up taking a backseat to some big news tomorrow, when House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is expected to send articles of impeachment to the Senate, kicking off the final phase of what's been a deeply partisan impeachment process in which both parties have been crying foul just about every step of the way.
House Democrats are treating impeachment like a political toy. Like a political toy.
If Leader McConnell doesn't hold a full and fair trial, the American people will rightly ask, what are you, Leader McConnell, and what is President Trump hiding?
In a new Quinnipiac poll, 87% of Democrats say they think Trump should be removed from office. Just 5% of Republicans agreed. But that divide is not just on impeachment. It's personal, too. In a recent Pew Research survey, around 80% of both Democrats and Republicans said they had cold feelings towards members of the other party, higher than any other year since the poll began. Today, even actor Vince Vaughn is feeling the hate online, caught on video at the College Football National Championship, deigning to shake Donald Trump's hand. Of course, all this animosity didn't just come down the escalator with Donald Trump. A new two-part special from Frontline out this week spells it all out. It's called America's Great Divide, From Obama to Trump. Director and producer of this amazing work, Michael Kirk, joins me now. Michael, it's good to see you.
Thanks, Jim.
So Obama tries to unite people and fails. Trump sees the division and exploits it. Is that a fair summary of 4 hours of television?
Well, there you go. Why do we have to watch it?
But that is the thrust of this, right?
It is. It is the uniter versus the divider. And the uniter, the great sad part of the story from Obama's perspective, is he comes in believing red, blue, nope, we're the United States of America, and leaves at the end of our film last night feeling that the division is even deeper than when he took over. And that leaves the field wide open for Donald Trump.
Speaking of division, I mean, there's so many takeaways. One of the major takeaways for me for the Obama segments is about racism rearing its head, and in the Trump segments, about truth bowing its head, for lack of a better expression. That's fair, too.
That's really right. What happens when you make a film is often the film talks to you and says, this is what's really inside all these stories. And the story that emerged from Obama was that race, he didn't even really know it at the very beginning, but race becomes the dominant feature that activates people who call themselves the Tea Party and many others, and creates that failure for Obamacare to really catch on. All kinds of other things happen, and in Trump's case, of course, it's the divide.
So the first black president's thing, starting with Obama, is bold on the issue very early on and gets slapped down a little bit when the Henry Louis Gates things, when he's arrested at his own house,
right,
just maybe a mile or so from here. But after he has to, I don't know if it's fair to say he apologized, but pretty close. You have it in your film.
No, he does apologize.
For overreacting.
Right.
More muted response on Trayvon Martin and Ferguson and those things. Almost as if, maybe this is inappropriate, that he learned a lesson, that caution was the route to go.
Well, I think that's right. And I think despite the ongoing entreaties from African Americans, prominent African Americans, who were coming to him and saying, it's time for you to do something. You were elected by a majority of black people. You must do something. You don't have to be the president of black America. You are the president of the United States of America. But you cannot walk away from things that are actually happening to black people, especially black young people who are being killed by police officers.
And he took the bait set by a guy who might run for office a little bit later, Donald Trump, on the birtherism stuff, yeah?
When that happens, I think the people we talked to inside, real close to Obama, said that it was just astonishing to him. In the beginning, he wanted to ignore it, the idea that this birtherism idea was out there, and it was just kind of on the edges of the web. As soon as Donald Trump, a TV star, the star of The Apprentice, takes it and becomes the face of the movement, Obama knows he's in for the fight.
You know, and it's interesting. It's only after he loses the Senate, so both houses are in Republican hands, his last 2 years, he knows unity is impossible. It's also impossible to get anything through the Senate. On race to begin with, he finally appears to feel freed. One of my favorite parts, and one of the things I knew nothing about, we all remember him singing Amazing Grace when he's at the memorial for the 9 African Americans slain in that church in Charleston. What I didn't know, and by the way, your movie, this long pause, he recites the words and then a long pause before he starts singing. He consulted with his staff on the way down saying, I'm thinking of singing Amazing Grace. What kind of advice did they give him?
He's flying on Air Force One on the way down there. He's written a speech with Ben Rhodes earlier in the day at the White House, and he says to Ben, my theme of my speech is Amazing Grace. And he says, I might sing Amazing Grace. And Rhodes says, no, Mr. President, I've heard you sing, don't sing Amazing Grace. He's on the plane with Michelle, his wife, and Valerie Jarrett. Right. And he says, I'm thinking about singing, and they both go, oh, no, please don't sing. So that when there is this pause that you see, Obama said Amazing Grace, he said, God's grace will shine down on us. He takes this long pause, and Valerie, we insert her voice where she said, oh no, it looked like he was really going to do it. He takes that long breath, and when he does, it brings down the house.
And so he finds his footing and his voice on race near the end of his term, and also in terms of action. When he knows he can't get anything through Congress anymore, he took a page, or at least he gave a page, to Donald Trump and started doing everything by executive action. And who but Steve Bannon, the brain in the Trump operation since practically the beginning, praises him for just doing it, kind of thing.
It's an amazing thing. I did a almost 3-hour interview with Bannon. Really going through it all. Fascinating.
Scruffy beard the whole time.
The whole time. Well,
and barn jacket, I hope.
Yes, he changed from sort of normal clothes, a Ralph Lauren shirt, into his army outfit for the interview. A fascinating experience all by itself at the Breitbart Embassy, in the shadow of the Supreme Court. Anyway, he's talking about the power of these executive orders. And so much of the right went kind of crazy when Obama did it. But in fact, Bannon, much to my surprise in the interview and in the film, says, he became my hero. Now, this is a leader who comes out and punches you right in the face and says, I'm going forward.
You know, just as you make clear that on the day of the inauguration, when Barack Obama is talking about unity, virtually every Republican leader in Congress and before is meeting in a bar on day one, deciding how they're going to make sure they defeat virtually everything Obama does. Speaking of the importance of day one set the tone also for the Trump administration. We know, of course, it was the largest crowd in the history of all the inaugurations, except that it wasn't. And then you talked to Sean Spicer, obviously the first press guy, and here's what Spicer had to say.
Did you lie on his behalf?
No.
Never.
No. There were plenty of times when, look, your job, you may not go full on it, but I don't think that's your. I think the job of the press secretary is to articulate what the principal wants articulated.
How hard was for those words to get out of his mouth, did you think, as you're sitting there?
It's a reporter's responsibility to ask the question and to keep your mouth shut and just let him answer it however he wants to do it. And he what we all call fumfered a little bit in there.
He struggled getting it there.
He did. I think he didn't want to say what we all know he did, because you can see during his very first press conference when he's sent out by Trump to face the press and essentially lie about the size of the
For
crowd.
an audience of one, just like you showed Brett Kavanaugh's final performance before Congress, before an audience of one. You suggest the post-truth era began with Sarah Palin, obviously continued Kellyanne Conway, the interview with Chuck Todd, where she invents the term alternative facts. That changed American politics in a huge way, did it not?
I think to the extent that race really mattered in the division that is created around and the result of Obama's presidency, the malleability of truth, what has actually happened with truth, and the way that Trump has used it to undermine institutions like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, James Comey, Bob Mueller, all of those kind of things are all associated with this idea about what is true and what is fake news. And if, as a leader, you can make the people of your country question what we do and question what is the truth, who are you hearing it from, then you can be very successful at leading the agenda. That is what so many people I talked to in the making of this film said.
You know, one of the brilliance, and I use the term intentionally on the part of Trump, is he has done what virtually every consultant has suggested doesn't work. You have to reach out to everybody. And with two exceptions, on his victory night, where he was conciliatory, right, and in a meeting when he's almost like a puppy with Barack Obama, and with those two exceptions, he has totally rejected that advice and built this career on just appealing to a base that is much more intense than anybody else can imagine.
So many people that I talked to in the making of this film said they have never seen a president. Every president who gets elected by a base gets to the Oval Office, the weight of the office itself is on them. And they remember the words we all used about Trump was, he will pivot. He will have to pivot. In order to run the country, you have to pivot, because there's all these countervailing influences on you, the Justice Department, the Treasury Department, the exigencies of being president. But this is the first president anybody can remember who did nothing, has done nothing to reach out and extend his base. It's all about feeding that percentage of angry, motivated voters who have signed on and asked him to be their wrecking ball in the swamp.
Speaking of pivot, you end the film, I guess, the only piece that looks to the future about whether America will pivot after Donald Trump. And you have some stunning commentary. Frank Lutz, who I assume most people know, essentially been a Republican consultant and Republican pollster, answers your question. Here's Lutz.
We were far more divided in the Civil War, far more divided during the Great Depression. But we've always had hope in the future. And that hope, we're losing it with this division.
He wasn't the only one who thought that, was he?
The vast majority of people we talked to, Republicans, Democrats, we talked to lots of Republicans and conservatives in this film, talk show hosts, radio talk show hosts, all of them deeply concerned about where we are as a country right now. I leave making these 4 hours with a real sense of dread. Where are we as a nation? As the curtain goes up now on this election year in 2020, something's going to happen in November. Will the American people will Trump himself, will others, will whoever the Democratic nominee is, will the sides somehow find some way to get together about it? Everybody I asked that question to said no.
We've just scratched the surface of 4 brilliant hours, as always. Michael, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Part 2 of America's Great Divide, from Obama to Trump, premieres tonight at 9 right here in WGBH2, or you can stream the entire series now at pbs.org/frontline. Don't vote without seeing it.